Welcome back to the war, where the battles that shaped our world are brought back to the forefront. Today, we're diving into one of the most colossal clashes of World War II, a battle of steel, fire, and sheer will. The epic tank battle of Kursk, a titanic showdown between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union that would change the course of history. This wasn't just a battle. It was a clash of titans that would decide the fate of the Eastern Front. So buckle up and join us at Legacy of War as we take a deeper look into this defining moment of World War II. Before we start the video, don't forget to check out our selection of playlists. We cover other wars like Vietnam, the World Wars, as well as Viking and Roman times. We will also be adding to our collection soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now relax and enjoy the video. That's in order. Setting the stage. Let's take a step back to the summer of 1943. The Eastern Front is a brutal, grinding war of attrition. The German Wehrmacht, once seemingly unstoppable, has been bloodied and beaten in the harsh winters of Russia. Hitler's dreams of a quick victory over the Soviet Union are fading, and the Red Army is gaining momentum. But the German High Command has one more ace up its sleeve, a massive, all-out offensive designed to cut off a huge bulge in the Soviet lines, centered around the town of Kursk. This, they hoped, would cripple the Soviet forces and turn the tide of the war back in Germany's favor. But little did they know, the Soviets were ready for them. What was about to unfold would be the largest tank battle in history and one of the most brutal confrontations of the war. The prelude, Operation Citadel. In early 1943, after their crushing defeat at Stalingrad, the Germans were desperate to regain the initiative. The plan they devised was codenamed Operation Citadel, an ambitious attack designed to encircle and destroy Soviet forces around the Kursk salient, a bulge in the front lines that extended into German-held territory. Hitler believed that by eliminating this bulge, he could stabilize the front and prepare for a renewed push into Soviet territory. The Germans assembled a staggering array of firepower for this operation. Nearly 3,000 tanks, over 9,000 artillery pieces, and almost 2,000 aircraft. This was a force designed to smash through the Soviet defenses and reclaim the initiative on the Eastern Front. But the Soviets were far from unprepared. Thanks to their spy network, they had advanced knowledge of the German plans. Instead of meeting the Germans head-on in an open field battle, they turned Kursk into a fortress, a deadly trap filled with layer upon layer of defensive positions, mines, and anti-tank guns. The Soviet plan was simple but brutal. Let the Germans come to them, bleed them dry, and then launch a massive counterattack. But could it work? Or were the Soviets underestimating the power of the German war machine? The battle begins July 5, 1943. On July 5, 1943, Operation Citadel was launched. The German forces, spearheaded by elite units like the Grossdeutschland Division and SS Panzer Corps, surged forward with the intent to break through the Soviet lines. The opening hours saw some of the most intense fighting of the entire war. The Germans faced a nightmarish landscape. The Soviet defenses were deep and well prepared, with multiple lines of trenches, barbed wire, and minefields. The Germans made slow progress, but the cost was enormous. Every inch gained was paid for in blood and burning tanks. In the north, the German 9th Army attacked the northern face of the Kursk salient, while in the south, the 4th Panzer Army, under the command of General Hoth, drove towards the town of Prokhorovka, soon to become infamous as the site of the largest tank engagement in history. As the Germans clawed their way through the Soviet defenses, the Red Army was waiting, ready to unleash their own armored might. What happened next would go down in history as a day of steel and fire. The climax, the Battle of Prokhorovka. On July 12th, the Germans made their final push towards Prokhorovka, where over 1,200 tanks and self-propelled guns faced off in a massive armored duel. The landscape was flat and open, perfect for tank warfare. This was the moment the Germans had been waiting for, a chance to crush the Soviet armor and break through to the rear of the Soviet defenses. But the Soviet response was overwhelming. Hundreds of T-34 tanks poured into the battle, charging headlong into the German lines in a desperate bid to halt their advance. The fighting was intense and chaotic, with tanks clashing at point-blank range. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the roar of engines and guns. Despite their superior training and equipment, the Germans were unable to achieve a decisive breakthrough. The Soviet defenses were too deep, their resolve too strong. The battle raged for hours, but by the end of the day, it was clear that the German advance had been halted. The fields around Prokhorovka were littered with the smoking wrecks of hundreds of tanks, both German and Soviet. The Germans had thrown everything they had into the battle, but it wasn't enough. The Soviet lines held, and the tide of the battle was about to turn. The turning point: Soviet counteroffensive. With the German offensive stalled, the Red Army unleashed their own counteroffensive. Soviet forces, led by Generals Zhukov and Vasilevsky, launched a series of powerful attacks against the German flanks. The Germans, exhausted and depleted after days of heavy fighting, were unable to hold the line. Operation Citadel was officially called off on July 17th, just 12 days after it began. What was supposed to be a decisive German victory had turned into a costly failure. The Soviet Union now had the initiative, and they would never relinquish it. From this point on, the Red Army began its relentless advance westward, pushing the Germans back all the way to Berlin. The Battle of Kursk marked the last major German offensive on the Eastern Front and the beginning of the end for Hitler's ambitions in the East. The Battle of Kursk was not just a military defeat for Germany, it was a strategic disaster that they would never recover from. But what were the true costs of this battle, and how did it shape the rest of the war? The aftermath: a Pyrrhic victory. The Battle of Kursk was a brutal, bloody affair. The Germans lost over 200,000 men and more than 700 tanks, losses that they could ill afford. The Soviets suffered even heavier casualties, with estimates of over 800,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. But unlike the Germans, the Soviets could replace their losses, and the battle had given them a decisive advantage. The failure of Operation Citadel had a profound impact on the course of World War II. It shattered the myth of German invincibility and boosted the morale of the Soviet Union. It also marked the beginning of a series of Soviet offensives that would eventually push the Germans out of Eastern Europe and into the heart of Germany itself. The Battle of Kursk was a turning point, a moment when the tide of war shifted irreversibly against Nazi Germany. It was a battle of epic proportions, fought with tenacity and valor on both sides. But ultimately, it was the Soviets who emerged victorious. Conclusion: Legacy of Kursk. The Battle of Kursk is often overshadowed by other battles of World War II, but its significance cannot be overstated. It was a clash of titans, a battle that tested the limits of human endurance and the power of modern warfare. For the Soviets, it was a moment of triumph, proof that they could stand up to the might of the German war machine and win. For the Germans, it was a bitter defeat, one that marked the beginning of their long and bloody retreat. As we look back on this monumental battle, we remember the bravery and sacrifice of those who fought and the lessons that history has taught us. The Battle of Kursk was more than just a fight for territory. It was a battle for the future, one that helped shape the world we live in today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Check back in again soon. Salute.